Today we've got the U.S. Senator from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar. Thanks so much for coming back on.
Well, it's great to be on again, Brian. Thank you.
So now you and a small group of Democratic senators, including Joe Manchin, have crafted the Freedom to Vote Act. So what's in that bill?
It's a good bill. It's got good reviews from everyone from Barack Obama to Stacey Abrams to the voting rights groups across the country. And the cornerstone of it is guaranteeing the freedom to vote. And it is firmly grounded in the Constitution that says Congress can make or alter the rules for federal elections. What it says is you've got to be able to allow people to vote by mail, not make them get a notarized signature to get their ballot. Yes, that's what South Carolina does right now. They should be able to vote on weekends leading up into an election for 15 days. That is exactly what was outlawed by Georgia's law, which basically said during the runoff period, that's when Senator and Reverend Warnock and Senator Ossoff won last time, you can no longer vote on weekends, if you can imagine. But you can vote on weekends before that. The Georgia law also says you can register 29 days ahead, but guess how long the runoff period is? 28 days. It says you've got to put your birth date on the inner ballot envelope on the outside. So what the minimum standards do for federal law is it says, look, you can't do that kind of crap that just tries to limit your right to vote. You've got to have early voting, same day registration. It says the 14 states that don't require IDs don't have to have them, and the rest you can use a utility bill, a student ID. You can just sign a sworn statement saying it's me. And so we basically got to the core of what's going to protect people's right to vote, as well as including the Disclose Act, so important to get the dark money out of our politics. So we're pretty happy with the bill, and we have everyone signing their name on it, including Senator Manchin.
Well, now that bill is being billed as a pared-down version of S1, the For the People Act. So what's been taken away from that bill to this one?
Well, some of the changes are really good. The rural areas, it was going to take them a while to comply. We wanted to make sure that we gave them the time to do it. If they can't maybe staff polling place every weekend night, they can do it during the day. We did things like that have been very accepted. The one thing that we added, which is really important, that was not even in the For the People bill, because people keep coming up with ways to hurt elections, is we made it so that you cannot get rid of a local election official except for malfeasance or something bad. Right now, they're just replacing them in Georgia and letting the state legislature take it over. This was Senator Warnock's bill, really, really important, and as well as preserving records and getting at some of these sham audits. So we were able to put things in the bill that's actually new. So I think one of the reasons you see it so well received is we kept the strengths of the bill and then focused on a number of the things that really mattered with voting. Some of the ethics provisions, that will be worked on. There's actually more bipartisan support for some of those. I think they'll be in a separate package, but we wanted to really focus on the voting and the dark money.
As you mentioned, Joe Manchin was involved in crafting this legislation with you and a few others. He obviously supports it, but I mean, this is the question everyone's asking, right? How does he intend on getting this passed with the filibuster intact? And is there any indication that he would support a carve-out on the filibuster? Because remember, McConnell came out almost immediately and dumped cold water on this bill. And even moderates like Susan Collins have come out against it too.
Well, we're not done yet. Joe is still working with Republicans. I've been reaching out to some of them, and we want to make sure we have gotten to that point. And so, as we say, I said to someone the other day, well, we'll cross the bridge of the procedural changes when we get to it. And a radio host said, well, that'll be a really short walk. But in truth, we're still talking to them, and I think that'll take, another, we hope to get that resolved in a week or so. So we're doing that, seeing what they have to offer, and then moving on to looking at procedural changes. And I will say that Senator Manchin in the past has said he's open to the standing filibuster. And that would mean that the other side would actually have to be there, at least 40 of them, and speak the entire time like they used to in the old days, which would be a great improvement if they're going to put themselves in the way of legislation that in many of the provisions supported by 70–80% of the people of this country. That's what they're up against. And so that's one way to do it. You mentioned a carve out. another way to do it. And so we are just literally, we could not get anywhere if we didn't have the agreement on the substance. I got to tell you, maybe we minimized that before because we voted to allow debate on the bill, and he did, but we really wanted to have airtight agreement on the substance, and we got that done, and in a way that's very important. And by the way, he participated in those meetings as a former Secretary of State through the entire summer. We must have had 10, 15, over Zoom, in person, and he was there every single time and met with the civil rights group. So let's hope that we can get some more support for the bill. If we can't, then we have to look at the procedural changes. But I am so devoted to this. It is becoming clearer and clearer every day that we're not going to be able to move forward as a democracy if we don't protect the freedom to vote. What happened in Georgia and Texas, they're trying all over the country.
Yeah, and the part that I'm most concerned about is partisan gerrymanders, because Republicans will have the ability to effectively legislate Democrats out of government, and we can lose the House for a decade, which of course means zero legislation on climate change, for example, which is do or die for us right now, and that's not to mention abortion rights, healthcare, and on and on.
After the Texas abortion decision, exactly. And, so this, we put standards in place. Like, you can't have partisan gerrymandering, and went through that instead of managing exactly what the commissions would look like. And we actually, that was a broad agreement that was a better way to go, but it would solve the problem you're talking about. And it's also, by the way, when you raise climate change, immigration reform, it's another reason I want to abolish the filibuster.
While you were crafting this bill, was the gravity of this situation, especially the idea of being legislated out of the House for the next decade, was the gravity of that understood by everyone? Like, this is effectively our last chance to ensure that Democrats have any shot of a majority in Congress for the next decade?
I really think it was, and it was one of the reasons that we did the field hearing in Georgia, for instance, so we could directly hear. Senator Merkley, who led the For the People bill, he and I just this week did a hearing via Zoom remotely in Oregon. I went to Wisconsin with Tammy Baldwin, and by the way, heard about their law that luckily they have a Democratic governor that vetoed it. They would have allowed, the Republican legislature voted for only one drop-in mail box for ballots in the entire city of Milwaukee. And he had to veto that. And that's the place where people had stood in homemade masks and garbage bags in the rain just waiting to exercise their right to vote. So this is a plan. When most parties lose elections, they reevaluate, right? They say, okay, should we change our candidates? Should we change our policies? Should we change our messages? That's gone on both sides of the aisle for a long time. This time, sadly, the Republican Party, Donald Trump still out there, decided, no, we're just going to try to change our voters. And because so many people voted in the last election in the middle of a public health crisis. And so that is not democracy, and that's a case that we have to make.
I interviewed Chuck Schumer a few weeks back, and on voting rights, he said failure isn't an option, which stuck with me, if for no reason other than... It
is a very memorable line. I've repeated it myself. I heard it from him too.
And we need some shred of hope to desperately cling to. So if that line is going to be that for us, then so be it.
It's that, but it's also the substance. We have a really strong bill that we have uniform agreement and agreement with our House colleagues and all kinds of things. So we really work this.
I guess my question is failure an option here? And if we don't get a carve out for the filibuster or some change to the filibuster, are there any other tools in our toolkit that we can deploy here?
There is one that's good. That's the John Lewis bill. And Lisa Murkowski at least has signaled an interest in that. But the idea of the John Lewis bill is very important. It's just a different way of doing it. And what it would be that if you have a state that's proven to have had instances of discrimination, the Justice Department have to pre-clear or approve changes they make to their election laws. That's good. The problem is it's only moving forward, right? All this other stuff stays in place. And that's why both of them are important to do at the same time. The next thing would be funding for elections and the like, tying it to some requirements. We've done some of that before, but it's not going to get us to where we need to do. I think it's important. I actually tried to do some of it with the reconciliation bill, but it's not going to be the standards that we need in place.
So you've been heavily involved in getting a provision for Medicare drug price negotiation into the reconciliation bill. Can you just give a brief overview comparing the U.S. to the rest of the world when it comes to prescription drug prices? And what would be your message to those Democrats? We've had a few Democrats on the Energy and Commerce Committee, who actually blocked prescription drug price negotiation from passing. So what's your message to these Democrats who are presenting themselves as obstacles to this?
This is our moment. And drug prices right now in the U.S., there's no country that pays more. That is absurd and should make everyone so angry. Why? It's our taxpayers that have invested in a bunch of the research. And right now you've got situations where, like Lyrica, that nerve pain drug, it's gone up nearly 50% in 5 years. Canada, for many drugs, they're 2 to 3 times less expensive than they are in the US. And so one solution, and I know for some of your younger viewers are like, Medicare? But Medicare, 46 million customers in that program of seniors. And if we allow Medicare to negotiate prices, right now we allow the VA to do it, and that's good for veterans. We got to keep that in place. But there is a ban on seniors negotiating. So Medicare can't negotiate. The prices are set with the drug companies. We want to allow negotiation to get the prices down. That actually helps everyone, not just your grandma, not just your mom. It helps everyone because that is the biggest block. And if we bring those drug prices down, it'll help students afford insulin. It'll help kids get their EpiPens. And so that's why we're so focused on this, something Bernie Sanders and I have been working on together for a long time, including bringing in less expensive drugs from other countries. And I lead the major bill on Medicare negotiation in the Senate. And it brings in, at least one version of the bill, brings in over $500 billion. So this isn't one of those things where we're spending money. We can use this money to pay for other things. And also it helps individual customers with their copay and the like. And so that's the case that I'm making on the facts. Over 90% of the public is with me. Over 90% of Democrats and Republicans. So these arguments that they are making are wrong. The people know it. And I am making my case. This is it. Let's get it in this bill, what we call reconciliation, which is all about bringing costs down. Childcare, housing, school, and let's do it finally for prescription drugs.
Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for joining. It's always great talking to you.
Thank you. It's great to be on.